In this video, we're going to show you how to install the parking brake shoes on your Kia Sorento located behind your rear brake rotors. Using a 21mm socket, loosen and remove your lug nuts. Go ahead and grab your wheel, remove it, and set it aside. Now I want to go ahead and remove our brake caliper here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver. I'm going to go in this side here between the brake pad and the caliper, and I'm going to gently pry. And what's actually happening here is I'm pushing the piston in. I'm going to apply some pressure like that. Now you can see that our caliper is free floating. We have the pressure off of our brake pads. I'm going to use our 14mm socket, loosen and remove our 2 bolts here securing the caliper. Now when undoing this here, you want to make sure that the caliper does not fall off and pull on the flex hose here. You can damage a flex hose and that's going to cause more potential brake issues down the road. So just be careful with that. Now this flex hose is long enough where we could actually remove our caliper assembly and set it up on top of the control arm. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and press our piston all the way into the caliper. I'm going to slowly compress this in. That's it right there. With that pushed in all the way, we can now go ahead and take our caliper and set it up on top of the control arm. Let's go ahead and remove our old brake pads. Next thing we want to do is loosen and remove the 2 bolts securing our caliper bracket. And we're going to use our 14mm socket. Go ahead and loosen, remove our 2 bolts. I'm going to leave this bolt in just a few threads to keep this caliper bracket from spinning up and down when I go to remove this one here. Now to remove our rotor here, we have 2 Phillips head set screws. Now these are put on from the factory to keep the rotor in place during assembly. If your vehicle does not have these, it is not critical to the operation of the vehicle. Go ahead and use your Phillips head screwdriver, loosen and remove these. Once you have the screws removed, go ahead and grab that brake rotor and slide that off. Now here we have our parking brake shoes exposed. This is the rearward one, this is the forward one. Well, the rear one is completely missing the braking material. We just have the steel parking brake assembly, and the front is just worn super thin. Now holding these in place are a pin through the back backing plate, comes through to this little spring clip right here, and then there's one positioned at about 4 o'clock on the other side here. I want to go ahead, loosen and remove these. So I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers, and around the back I'm going to hold that pin head, and I need to push in and rotate. Now ours is pretty rusted, but what you want to do is turn it so that it unlocks itself. It's keyed, meaning it has a slot in it, and the pin itself has a blade on it that comes through, and then you twist it a 1/4 turn and it locks it into place. So you have to turn this and then separate it. Now I'm going to do the same for the forward unit. Now that I have the spring clips removed, there is a horizontal spring on the top that locks the 2 top ones together with the parking brake assembly here. And then on the bottom, there's an adjuster with a spring. Now what we have here, this is a simple flathead screwdriver with a notch put in the middle. This is key for popping these springs out. You can normally get these in behind, like so, and then use that screwdriver to go ahead and release that. Now the adjuster itself, ours is kind of rusted, so we're simply going to go ahead and tap it. There it is. We can go ahead and remove that. Now when you remove this here, the rearward or the forward portion of our adjuster is just a free floating pin. This side here is normally a threaded component that adjusts in and out. Well, ours is seized. We're going to have to work on this to loosen that up. We'll set that aside, but remember that the threaded portion goes towards the rear and the pin style goes towards the front. You can remove that spring, Set that aside. Now let's go back up top. On the upper portion here, we have a larger screwdriver with that notch put in it, because this is more of a heavy duty spring. And once that spring is released, both of our shoe assemblies or parking brake assemblies will come off. We'll be reusing the spring, so we'll set that aside. Next thing is to go ahead and clean everything up here. I want to clean the backing plate as well as the hub face here. Going to use some spray solvent, soak everything down. Now we do have some towels underneath to catch all this runoff. I'm going to start with the outside here. Use my bristle brush and clean this. Now you want to make sure that the ridge around the face of the hub here and the rim are cleaned, because that's where the rotor is going to sit. I want to make sure that it sits flush when we install that. Let's go ahead to the backing plate here. Now there's going to be 6 contact points on our backing plate. There's going to be one here, one here, one here. There's one just beside it, and then there's going to be 2 more on the forward side that match this here. You do need to make sure that that backing plate is solid and those contact points are all clean. If your backing plate areas for the parking brake shoes are rotted through, you need to replace the backing plate. Once you have that clean, we now want to go ahead and focus on the parking brake assembly here. So here is a mechanical assembly that's going to actuate your brake shoes, and this is pretty important. Now there's a pivot in the middle here, and there's a hook that goes through on the back side of this backing plate that has a cable attached to it. So we have to remove this here and make sure that this is all free floating on the inside. So if you go onto the back side, you can see the hook right here, and we need to unhook that from the cable. And once we do that, we'll be able to pull this assembly out of the backing plate, and then we'll work on this on the bench to free it up. Now that we have the cable unhooked from the back, there's a rubber boot here that should try and prevent a lot of debris from coming through. So we're going to work that hook out. And here is the component. Now this hook should be pivoting back and forth. Here is the pivot point, and this should be swinging back, but it's frozen. So we're going to go ahead and pinch the front side here into our vise, spray this down, and work this free. I want to make sure that the side that you're putting in the vise is not the one with the pivot pin on it. Go ahead and pinch it down gently. I'm going to go ahead and start tapping this. I'm also going to spray this down with some rust penetrant. Let this soak in a little bit. Now, if you have something to put underneath here to support this, keep it from rocking, it would probably be ideal. Here we go. And we just used a block of aluminum here. You can use whatever you have, a piece of wood or something like that. I'm going to work this back and forth. Now with this separated, you can do a couple different things. If you have a sanding disc on your air tool, you can go ahead and clean this up here. You can use a piece of sandpaper. What you want to do is clean up the 2 sides here, as well as the rest of this component. You can use your wire brush, take down all that scaly rust. What I'm gonna do now is, even though I did spray this down with some rust penetrant, my pin is spinning freely, so we're good there. I'm now gonna go ahead and use some spray solvent. I'm gonna clean this off. I'm gonna put it into my wire wheel machine and clean everything up, and then we'll come on back once this is cleaned up. Now we went and ran our component through the wire wheel machine. We cleaned up a lot of scaly rust. We still have a little bit of a binding issue where we put this arm up and it catches on some rust buildup inside here. I'm gonna pop this back into the vise. Now at this point here, you can choose to use whatever you have. You can use a flathead screwdriver. You can use some sandpaper on the end of your screwdriver. I'm gonna try scaling some of the rust out. I have some 80 grit sandpaper on a little strip here. I'm gonna wedge it in there. Clean that up. Now I went ahead and I folded it up a few times here to get the desired thickness. so it sands both sides on the inside. Now if yours is in really, really bad shape, you can go ahead and source one of these out. In most cases, they can be repaired or refinished like we're doing. Already it's cleaning up quite a bit better than what it was from being seized up earlier. There we go, using some spray solvent, got rid of a lot of the sanding debris inside there. That's perfect. There's even a little bit of side-to-side play, which is exactly what you want. Back and forth is perfect. We remove this from our vise. In the end, you really just want that to be free floating like so. If you want, you can put a bit of rust penetrant in there, maybe even a little dab of grease if you want in that pivot. Maybe a little bit of grease on these pivots here. And then we can go ahead and reinstall this. So before installing this here, we chose to do anti-seize compound on our pivot points instead of grease. Seeing how we had to clean off a lot of rust, the anti-seize should help prevent some of that there. So now we're going to go ahead and slide this through the rubber boot. Push that through. Now I want to go ahead and get that to hook up on our cable end back there. Once we have that hooked, we'll go ahead and pivot this back into place. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of grease to the 6 contact points on our backing plate. Let's go ahead and do that now. And we just want a thin amount. We don't want to put globs of grease on there, so make sure that's spread thin. And these are the contact points where our parking brake shoes are going to make contact with the backing plate. That's why we're doing this. I'm going to use my bristle brush and I'm going to clean up our spring clips here. I'm going to do this to both of them. Get these ready for installation. Now if yours aren't rusty, just get those ready to go because we'll be using these next. I want to go put our pin through the back. Now installing your rearward parking brake shoe, there's going to be one with a little notch on the top and then a couple of grooves. At the bottom, it's a large square section. This is where the adjuster is going to go, which we're going to be installing later on. Make sure this is on top. Now on our pin, I like to go ahead and make sure that the pin end here is vertical up and down the blade. And I put my finger on the back there to hold it in place. I'm going to put this through. I want to go ahead and install the upper portion of the parking brake shoe. And we have our spring clip on our needle nose pliers here. I'm going to line up that notch with the spring clip with that post. I'm going to push it in and then rotate the spring clip. Now once that locks in, we're going to go ahead and rotate this whole unit here, like so. We're going to go ahead and repeat this exact process for the forward shoe. Now that we have both of our shoes installed here with at least the retainer springs, next thing is we want to go ahead and rebuild our adjuster that goes on the bottom. Now we have our adjuster here, and at this point here we had already went ahead and just kind of cleaned this up on the bench, put a little bit of grease on this. This side here, you want to unthread it, clean it up with a wire brush, put a little bit of grease on those threads, and we're going to thread this all the way in. Now you want to pay attention to the position of the notch. You want to make sure both notches are facing the same direction. The threaded part is going to go up against the rear shoe. And we're going to put this in between the parking brake shoes here. Push those together. Now we have our horizontal spring that needs to go in. So we're going to put this in the hole right here. Feed that in. And we're going to use our screwdriver with the notch in it. Get a hold of that and push that over and push that in like so. So that spring holds the 2 lower portions of our shoes together. Let's go ahead, back up to the top, and we're going to install our upper spring. I'm going to install our upper horizontal spring, and there's just one hole here and one hole right here. Now this one here is a little bit more complicated to put in because it's a much more beefier spring. I'm going to try using our thinner screwdriver on this one. Don't put your hand here if you're going to be doing something like this. You don't want to stab yourself. That's it. We have our upper spring installed. Go ahead and kind of jostle that around a little bit, make sure that everything is in position. Our next step is to go ahead and put some anti-seize compound on our hub face. Now, when installing your brake rotor, you want to pay attention to what is actually happening here. Our brake shoes, our parking brake shoes, make contact with the inside of our disc brake rotor here. The adjuster itself, located down here, as we move this here, will cause the parking brake shoes to expand. Knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and place our rotor on. And what we want to do is grab that rotor and wiggle it. We can see that it has some excessive play in here, and that tells me that we have a lot of room between the parking brake shoes and the inside of our rotor. So how do we fix that? We take up that space by adjusting this wheel, causing our parking brake shoes to expand out. I'm going to rotate this wheel down. And you'll be able to see a little bit more of a gap between the threaded end here and our adjuster wheel. Make sure this is centered. Go ahead and grab that rotor, line that up. And it's a little bit tighter. Now, in some cases, you can go ahead and adjust this, and you can use a pry tool to go up inside and adjust that if you want to. However, it's just as easy to go ahead and do it this way here. And what we're looking for is not a lot of drag on it, but we do want a little tension there. Still has some play in there. You see now I slid that on and it's flush. And there's just a tiny bit of drag on that. And that's perfect right there. Now, if you have the screws for your rotor, go ahead and install those. I'm going to use a little bit of spray here to go ahead and clean off our brake rotor surface. Make sure that that is free of any debris. Now what we want to do is take our bracket, slide that over, and get our bolt started here. Going to get that upper bolt started. I'm going to go ahead and grab the lower one. All right, we have both of those bolts in. Let's go ahead and snug them down. Make sure those are good and tight. I want to install our brake pads. You want to make sure that the inboard pad has a squeak tab attached to it here. Pop that into place. Go ahead and do the same on the outer pad here. Once we have those in, I'm going to go ahead and grab our caliper, slide that over, and you're going to have to push in on your pins here. Go ahead and grab the upper bolt, line that up and get that started, and go ahead and get that bottom one. I'm going to go ahead and snug these down. All right, we have all 4 of our bolts in. Let's go ahead and torque these into position. Go ahead and torque these down to 50 foot-pounds. Then you'll repeat for the upper one. Torque down our caliper to 20 foot-pounds. Now at this point, you want to go ahead and repeat this process for the driver's side. Before you install your wheels, hop into the vehicle, pump up that brake pedal. That brake pedal is probably going to go to the floor good 2 to 3 times, and then it'll start to build up from there. Once you get a good firm brake pedal, go ahead and install your wheels and go for a road test. Go ahead and grab your wheel, line it up on those wheel studs. Now we're going to go ahead and get our lug nuts started. Once we have them all started, we'll go ahead and snug them down. Let's go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 75 foot-pounds. You want to do this in a crisscross pattern. And you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.